Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise of complex source material to deliver the clearest, most thought-provoking insights.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into the sociology of family, gender, and sexuality.
And before we even get into the sources, let's just start with a simple exercise for you. When you hear the word family, what's the image that instantly pops into your head?
And maybe more critically, we need to ask, why that particular image?
Right.
We're really tackling a core social contradiction today because these institutions, like the family, they're fundamentally, well, they're socially constructed.
Meaning their definitions aren't set in stone.
Exactly. They aren't timeless facts. They're constantly shifting. I mean, historically, we've seen everything from matriarchal societies to patriarchal ones, and then, eventually this celebrated nuclear family model.
So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're going to unpack how these deeply embedded forces of gender and sexuality shape everything, from who we date to how we parent to where conflict and inequality still exist.
And we're going to keep contrasting let's say, the sociological reality against that idealized story that so many of us grow up with.
And this isn't just some abstract academic exercise, is it? This is immediate. The moment society went through a major stress test, the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw just how gendered our family structures really are.
Oh, absolutely. The research from that time, it's so consistent. It found that women experienced far more significant adverse social and economic impacts than men. They reported much higher rates of lost work and lost income.
And that's the key right there.
Right.
The pandemic didn't create this inequality out of thin air.
No, it just ripped the cover off.
It brutally exposed the flaws in a system that was already built on these, old gendered assumptions. The financial hit to women came directly from pre-existing wage gaps, plus this unspoken rule that women would just automatically absorb all the extra caregiving.
The whole system buckled, and women took the hardest hit.
Okay, so let's deconstruct the core institution itself, the family. Technically, the Census Bureau has a very legalistic definition.
Right, it's like a checklist. A group of two or more people, one's the householder, they're related by birth, marriage, or adoption, and they all live together.
But sociologists see it differently.
We prefer a more functional definition. We look past the legal contract and focus on the purpose. So for us, a family is defined by emotional bonds, by kinship, by relatedness, and how it functions as an economic unit.
And the gap between that functional reality and the widely held ideal, that image you probably just pictured, it's huge.
It's a chasm.
That ideal, that's usually the 1950s nuclear model, right? Husband, wife, couple of kids, a dog.
The white picket fence, yeah. But the data shows this model is, both historically and right now, an aberration. It's not the norm. Less than 2/3, under 65% of kids today live with both of their married biological parents.
And on the flip side of that, 26% of children live in single-parent households. So that nuclear ideal, it's just not the reality for a massive portion of the population.
And we have to put that ideal in its proper context. When people talk about traditional family values, they're almost always thinking about that post-World War II 1950s.
The Leave It to Beaver world.
Exactly, the breadwinner homemaker structure. And historians, they see this period as a genuine blip in U.S. history. It was a brief economic and social anomaly that just wasn't sustainable.
And that blip wasn't even as perfect as it's made out to be. The poverty rate in the 1950s was almost double what it is now. Teenage pregnancy rates were twice as high.
And you can't forget, that period is what gave us Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique,
right,
which captured this deep, pervasive unhappiness many women felt being locked into that homemaker role, and nothing else.
So if we shift from family structure to how families even begin, we land in this very gendered marketplace of dating and sex.
We've definitely come a long way from the very strict, chaperoned courting of the 19th century.
A shift that was really sped up by the automobile, of all things. It gave young people freedom and privacy.
And that freedom lets us engage in what sociologists call assortative mating.
Which is just the tendency to pick partners who are similar to us.
Right, across all sorts of markers.
Yep.
Culture, ethnicity, class. And increasingly, education level has become a huge one.
And you should really pause on that one. The rise of education as a major sorting factor has real-world economic impacts, especially with the costs of college for millennials and Gen Z.
It's likely one of the factors contributing to people getting married later, or in some cases, not at all. The filtering process just takes much, much longer.
And that filtering process, for most people now, happens in what we call the erotic marketplace.
Which is our term for modern dating, but especially online dating. And while these platforms are totally normal now, the experience is profoundly gendered,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to safety.
How so?
Well, the research shows women are twice as likely as men to express serious concerns about the physical and emotional risks of dating. And that's a caution that's rooted in, well, centuries of reality.
And if we look at it with an intersectional lens, you can see how prejudice is almost hard-coded into the system.
Oh, absolutely. Women of color have been historically over-sexualized, and that bias is so clear on dating platforms. You see it in those thinly veiled phrases and profiles like, I'm just not into, and then you can fill in the blank with a racial identity.
It's framed as personal preference, but it's really about ruling out entire groups of people based on racialized stereotypes.
Exactly. Or transphobic assumptions, like automatically ruling out dating a trans person. It reduces complex human beings down to a single characteristic.
This brings us to intimacy itself. When we move from dating to sex, we run into the power of sexual scripts.
These are basically socially constructed blueprints. They tell us how sex is supposed to happen, who should start it, who should get pleasure from it.
And they're built on some really problematic assumptions.
Deeply problematic. That men should always be in charge, that women shouldn't seem to enjoy it too much or express desire, or, this idea that men are just naturally more sexual. It completely undermines real intimacy.
And the direct, measurable result of these scripts is something called the orgasm gap. I find this single data point to be one of the most powerful illustrations of gender inequality.
It's staggering.
A major national survey found that 91% of men reported orgasming at their most recent sexual encounter. For women, it was only 64%.
And that gap isn't about biology. It's the direct outcome of unequal social scripting. When you dig into the numbers, it gets even clearer.
Go on.
Heterosexual men are at 95% and lesbian women are at 86%, both very high. But heterosexual women, they lag way behind at 65%.
So what's the driver there?
It's the double standard. This impossible tightrope women have to walk where they're supposed to want sex but not seem too willing, and where the focus is almost always on male pleasure as the main goal.
So what makes the difference for the women who do orgasm more often?
The research is pretty clear. They tend to receive more oral sex, they have longer sexual encounters, and this is the crucial part, they actually speak up about what they want. It's about communication and mutual focus.
So if these sexual scripts are learned out in the world, they're first taught in the home. The family is the #1 agent of gender socialization.
It's the first place we learn all the norms and roles and behaviors tied to our perceived gender. And it starts from the moment we're born, based on biological sex.
And the research shows it isn't subtle at all.
Not at all. Biological males are often given more privileges, more independence, and earlier. Later curfews, less oversight, and they're often exempt from domestic chores like cleaning or cooking.
Whereas biological females are socialized to be more passive, nurturing,
Yeah.
and to just assume those domestic duties are their job.
And consumerism just reinforces this constantly. It's inescapable. It starts with pink and blue clothing, then moves to gendered toys action versus nurturance.
I've even seen sexualized clothing marketed for baby girls, like high heels for infants. It's wild.
It is. While boys get slogans about being aggressive or a future leader, the gender binary is just baked into every part of our material world.
Which flows directly into parenting roles, where the pressure really mounts for women.
Yes, through what sociologists call intensive mothering. This is the immense social pressure on mothers to parent in these incredibly time-consuming, self-sacrificing, almost expert-level ways.
And this fuels the whole idea of the second shift.
Directly. That expectation that women come home from their paid job only to start their second unpaid job of household labor and childcare.
And for low-income women, especially women of color, this is just a brutal setup.
It's an impossible situation. They're expected to be a full-time intensive mother and a full-time essential worker. The system sets them up to feel like they're failing at both.
So if that's mothering, what about fathering? Does class play a role?
A huge role. Studies show class status really influences a father's involvement. Working-class fathers, like EMTs in one study, were actually more likely to be involved in daily hands-on care,
Compared to who?
compared to higher-status physician fathers who tended to participate more in, specialized activities, coaching a team, attending a school event.
And it's interesting how single fathers often adopt what we see as traditional mothering roles.
They do, but they reframe it. They see that high level of care as just their job, which allows them to maintain their masculine identity while doing all this complex domestic work.
And we absolutely have to push back on harmful stereotypes here.
We must. The myth that fathers of color are absentee is just that, a myth. The research clearly shows that many are deeply involved in their kids' lives through cohabitation, visitation, and financial support, completely contrary to the popular narrative.
That's such an important point because it leads us directly to the findings on queering family structures.
Yeah.
The body of research on LGBTQIA plus parenting is massive, and it has just completely refuted all the common myths.
All of them. The concerns about, disrupting a child's gender identity or causing mental health problems, they've all been soundly disproven.
So what's the most important factor for a child's development?
It is consistently, overwhelmingly, the quality of the family relationships. That's it. It has nothing to do with the parent's sexual orientation or gender identity.
In fact, there was a landmark analysis that found children of lesbian couples showed slightly lower rates of behavioral problems and higher rates of self-esteem than kids raised by heterosexual parents.
Which really forces you to question the entire premise that the traditional structure is somehow inherently superior.
But these families do face unique challenges.
They do. They deal with what's called minority stress, the constant burden of discrimination and internalized heterosexism. And that takes a toll on mental health and relationship satisfaction.
And there's legal instability too, right?
A huge amount. Legal protections for forming a family adoption rights, medical decision-making, they vary wildly from state to state, which creates this constant underlying precarity.
Okay, to get a wider view, let's quickly run through the three major sociological theories on family. First up, functionalism.
Functionalism sees the family as essential for keeping society stable. Its main jobs are socializing children, providing emotional support, and regulating sexual reproduction. It's all about maintaining order.
And the opposite view would be conflict theory.
Right. Conflict theorists argue the family is a machine for perpetuating social inequality. It's how wealth is passed down, and it reinforces patriarchy. It's also, a major site of conflict and violence.
And finally, symbolic interactionism.
This one zooms way into the micro level. It's all about daily interactions and shared meanings. Problems pop up when partners have different interpretations of the same event or symbol.
Using that conflict framework brings us to the really difficult topic of violence in relationships.
Intimate partner violence, or IPV, and sexual violence are fundamentally about dominance and control. They're perpetuated by patriarchy and what we call rape culture.
And rape culture is basically an environment where this kind of violence is normalized or excused.
Exactly. It shows up in excuses like it wasn't legitimate rape, or in victim blaming, like focusing on what someone wore, or this horrific idea that being intoxicated means you consent. These are huge barriers to reporting.
The data is it's a crushing indictment. 1 in 5 women experience IPV in their lifetime. For men, it's 1 in 7.
And the risk is so much higher for marginalized groups. For bisexual women, it's 61% lifetime IPV. Transgender individuals are 1.7 times more likely to experience IPV than cisgender people.
And with numbers that high, why is reporting so low?
The top reasons people give are 1, viewing it as a private matter, 2, a very real fear of retaliation from the abuser, and 3, devastatingly, the belief that the police just won't do anything to help.
The only defense against this is absolute ongoing consent.
It has to be a clear, unambiguous yes. And it's not a one-time contract. It has to be ongoing and enthusiastic for every single act. Anything less is assault.
So as we look to the future, what does positive change even look like?
Well, one promising area is in parenting with gender-inclusive socialization. Things like using non-gendered names or just letting kids choose their own gender expression without pressure.
Taking the burden off of them to fit into some restrictive box.
Exactly. It could raise a generation that's much more comfortable with truly egalitarian relationships.
And then there's policy. The structural stuff. In the U.S., the Family and Medical Leave Act from 1993 provides unpaid leave. In 2021, only 23% of private workers had access to any paid family leave.
Which forces parents, usually mothers, into an impossible choice between their family's economic stability and caregiving.
Now, contrast that with a country like Sweden.
The difference is night and day. They offer 480 days of subsidized, shared, paid leave. This completely normalizes father involvement. Nearly 90% of Swedish dads take that leave.
It fundamentally changes the game.
It reframes caregiving from a private, gendered burden to a shared societal responsibility. The thing is, while most Americans say they support parental leave, there's still less support, especially among older, more conservative groups, for the government funding needed to actually make it happen.
Well, so you started this deep dive by looking at the gap between the idealized family and the messy sociological reality. We've seen how gender roles and unequal sexual scripts create these persistent, real-world inequalities.
From the orgasm gap to the economic fallout of the pandemic on women to the minority stress that LGBTQIA plus families face.
Social change really requires education and advocacy to finally dismantle the power of that 1950s myth and expand our acceptance of all the diverse ways families actually exist.
Yeah, and the day is so consistent on this. Expanding our ideas of what a family is and what healthy relationships look like leads to better well-being for absolutely everyone.
And that brings us to our final, provocative thought for you to chew on. Given the research we discussed, that finding the children of lesbian couples showed slightly lower rates of behavioral problems and higher rates of self-esteem than children of heterosexual couples, what assumption does that finding force you to question about the inherent stability or supremacy of the traditional nuclear structure? And what might that mean for future efforts to create safer, more equitable family policies that genuinely serve the well-being of children rather than an idealized historical blip?